We were just talking about that off the air. It does feel like that the environment is perhaps more toxic than it has been in some time.
Which, really, thinking back, is hard to believe that it is. But I think it's pretty true. So many things going on, and it's a tough environment out there. And being a member of Congress is a tough role to have because you never have any downtime. You're in D.C. And of course folks on TV will say, well, Congress is on vacation, and I would always think to, our buddy Sean Hannity, I said, Sean, come on with me on my vacation to cover my 28 counties and later 24 counties, and we'll see how you like vacation. So, I do respect that it's tough on families, and you've got to have a family that really supports you in that effort, and you've got to mark out some time where you can just kind of crash a little bit and get away when you need to. It's hard to do.
You, of course, have firsthand experience with this, and I think those of us, maybe the average person not elected to office to Congress, thinks it's just so glamorous.
Oh, yeah. And about the second time I left my family, I got over the glamour, real quick.
I mean, it's hard.
It's a tough deal, but it's exciting. It's our nation's capital. Yeah. When you love your country and you love the history that we have, and if you look at the Capitol Dome walking, from your office to the Capitol, if it doesn't do something to you, that's when you really need to think, hey,
no doubt.
I shouldn't be here. It's a unique place, and that's why people and families travel, because it's got so much to offer.
No doubt. But you, I'm sure, are familiar with members who have publicly stated that they elected not to run for office again because of the stress it was putting not only on their families but on their pocketbooks as well.
Absolutely, and certainly, I didn't plan to stay there for life. 10 years was a good time of service, but at the end of 10 years, I was making 11% per year less with inflation. After 10 years, it's now been 15 years since members of Congress have gotten a raise, and the problem with that is. And I know listeners will say, well, they don't
need a raise. Yeah.
Well, the fact is, you're then creating a situation where only independently wealthy folks or somebody who thinks they just won the lottery can serve.
It's where we are now.
And that's pretty much where we are at this point, I think.
If you look at, say, the newcomers into the U.S. Senate, for the most part, they were independently wealthy before they got there.
Most of them, that would be true. Not all, but
but most.
But certainly a lot came in from a successful business career. And then, of course, if you go into Congress and you're an attorney, for instance, or a doctor, you cannot make any money off of those. But if you owned a chain of restaurants, well, life goes on just like it was. So it's a difficult challenge for a lot of members, and I'm thankful that I got to do that, and just it's the greatest honor I've had thus far in my life, and I'm thankful for that.
Yeah. All right, so let's get your thoughts on some of the current events going on.
There's only a few things to talk about, right?
I guess first thing is the recent indictment of former President Donald Trump. What do you think about that?
It's my first thought is okay, if he's done something that's illegal or wrong and he gets indicted, fine. But are we going to continue to ignore the Biden family and Burisma and all these other issues that are out there, the laptop of Hunter Biden? Well, fair is fair, and this is if there's something that's wrong, fine. But to have it not equally applied is the thing that gives you the real heartburn. So former Attorney General Barr just said recently that he would, if called upon, he would testify against Trump over the document issue. So, it certainly is. It's one that, all right, you're the president. If you're going to take those documents, maybe you should declassify them before you take those documents. I mean, that's one, thought and issue, but. I think it's still a little early to know, but it was a pretty extensive indictment. And the problem is there are other cases out there, as you know, in other jurisdictions, and there's such fear by the Democrats that Donald Trump might be elected, president again. Nobody's ever been pounded on like he has.
Agreed.
Whether you like him or not, you have to admit that it's a brutal process, and he's held up remarkably well. But I would hate to think that you're running for president and you've got several indictments against you while you're trying to do that. It makes it even more difficult.
I'm going to throw a hypothetical at you and get your reaction.
I'll give you a hypothetical answer then.
Well, that's fine. So there's a possibility he could be convicted. He could go to jail, and he could still be on the ballot. Do you think he wins from jail?
No.
Okay.
No.
Fair enough.
I don't. I think your first thought is, okay, if he's in jail and he's the president and he's elected as president in jail, where's the nuclear football going to be? How do you wake up the president at 2 a.m? There are all kinds of tough issues that you have to go through there. And, of course, at the end of the day, the fact that you're going after a former president like this, some things you just move on. And I think it's been a tough deal.
It's hard to conclude anything but this is totally political, that the DOJ and that our institutions have been weaponized. It's hard to look at it objectively.
I can't explain it any other way, to look at that. And
I agree.
I think you're right.
And the double standard.
It's a strong double standard.
Yeah.
In fact, there's one standard, and it's against conservative Republicans.
Do you think Representative Comer with the Oversight Committee, I think he's been doing a deadgum good job. What do you think?
He's done a really good job digging into information that we probably wouldn't have found. And I'll say this too: he's doing a good job as the head of that committee, as the chair. But I would also say they've got a great team, great staff, and that's made up with people that know how to investigate, know how to look at things. And so, I know when I was chairman, the staff made me look a whole lot smarter than I was on the Committee on House Administration. So, so I know he's got a great team around him. That helps a lot.
Yeah, lots of resources, and just calling it to the attention and getting it some sunshine on it, I think, more than anything. I was talking about the Burisma scandal in particular. So Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene has drafted articles of impeachment against the president. I've said here on the program, Congressman, that I'm not sure we'll ever, unfortunately, see another president elected where once the opposite party gains control of the House, they don't seek to impeach the president.
And it becomes very uneventful, at that point. It's like, okay, we've done this before, ho-hum, it doesn't help. We go back to Bill Clinton. It just really didn't matter at the end of the day, the allegations that were against him, or you go forward each president. Certainly it increased a lot under Trump. Nothing's happened yet on Biden. But, it very well could, like you're saying. Yeah. And is it going to be something that's a game changer? Usually that kind of backfires a lot of times. Because, again, it does look so political in that case.
That's the risk. Now,
if DOJ was doing their job in a fair way, then we would have a lot more information about the Hunter Biden issue, about did Joe Biden, wind up with, money going to his account or accounts. And then also there are, according to news reports, one of the Burisma executives has recorded tapes of 15 conversations with Hunter Biden and maybe 2 with the president when he was in another role.
Senator Grassley discussed that specifically on the floor.
Absolutely, which is a pretty bold move, really, on Grassley's part to do that. Now, is it getting a lot of news coverage right now? We'll know when Biden starts to get it, President Biden starts to get attacked on a regular basis, we'll know that they're giving up on him. Thus far, they really haven't.
That's a good point.
So once the national media says, "Hey, you're not going to be president any longer," and they start reporting a lot of the stuff that we know they should be, then you could wind up with those things happen.
That makes sense. You can hang around with us and talk some more, can't
Love to.
We got former Congressman Gregg Harper in the Element Well studios. We're stepping aside for a break. The fame there, Will, is that I have a photo of my wife and myself.
That's why I played that.
You know that, don't you?
Yeah.
With Smokey, sitting at home. I was at an event.
And he was sick, right?
He was sick, and he still performed for this group. It was like an awards deal, business deal. and we all got to meet him one-on-one and get our photo taken with him, and I cherish that photo. It's awesome. He's a great entertainer and such a fine man. What a great personality. He was sick, and he still performed for us, and it was incredible, as you can imagine. But we got former Congressman Gregg Harper in the Element Wealth studio. So first, the RNC is asking for the candidates to sign a pledge in order to be eligible to debate. There's some other criteria as well to get on the debate stage, but they're asking all the candidates sign a pledge saying you will support the nominee unconditionally. And Chris Christie has come out and said, I'm not doing that if it's Donald Trump. By the way, he didn't do it either in 2016, Christie rightly points out. And then Tim Scott has said, I'm not going to get into hypotheticals at this point. Right. This isn't unusual, but what do you think? Does this make sense? Is this the right policy for the RNC?
You know, you at the end of the day, we may all have different candidates that we support, but we're still going to vote for the Republican nominee. You know that at the end of the day. Yeah, I mean, it can get bitter and upset. You remember, like you mentioned, 2016, the one person that wouldn't make that pledge was Donald Trump.
That's exactly right.
And then everybody else did make that pledge, stuck with that pledge, except for John Kasich, who was governor of Ohio, who hosted the convention in Ohio in Cleveland that summer. Yep. And it's like, okay, well, so I don't think the pledge means a whole lot. If it's a criteria, I think most people would do that. The real criteria is, have you identified 100 people that actually might vote for you if you're way down the ticket right now? And I, at the end of the day, there'll be everybody will rally around whoever the nominee is. I feel pretty certain about that.
Well, I hope so. And Vivek Ramaswamy, also a candidate, Republican candidate for president, he issued a challenge like down at Miami in front of the courthouse a couple of weeks ago after the indictment, had a letter asking all the other candidates in all parties to sign, saying that they would pardon Donald Trump if he's convicted. And, I mean, some of that's just political showmanship, right? Get attention. And he did. He got attention.
Oh, he got a lot of news stories on that, didn't he? For sure. So.
Oh, well. All right, let's talk about former vice president, now candidate for president, Mike Pence. And so, Mike, I asked you before we came on the program, you caught this article as well. I found it fascinating, honestly, very revealing. This was on Friday. This was after the show is when it was published in the Wall Street Journal. I read the title, Mike Pence says Donald Trump may ditch conservatives. And he goes through some fairly decent detail there on a number of issues where he thinks Trump may not be the conservative we think they are. He says, for example, that he thinks Trump is kind of leaning into Elizabeth Warren's call for a wealth tax. The president criticized the abortion law signed into law by Governor Ron DeSantis that limits abortions to 6 weeks. He says it's too harsh. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
No, look, I think that Pence, of course, I'll go ahead and tell you I'm a little biased.
Okay.
When I started in Congress, Mike Pence was in the House as well. Yeah. And so, I mean, look, we're from Mississippi. I'm one generation removed from the family farm. And so I think listeners will understand this. Mike Pence was my bell cow. Okay. He was the one that if I wasn't sure that first term, if I had voted the right way, if I had some question about a bill, I'd look up on the board, and if I'd voted the same way as Mike Pence, I just said, well, I'm not worried about that, because I knew he would never lead us off into the ditch.
Sure. So makes sense.
I think Pence, it's interesting. He was late announcing that he was officially going to run. So he's now polling a distant third in that race between Trump, DeSantis, and then Pence in single digits. But moving up a little bit, I've noticed over some polling that's being done. And he's doing it, I think, the right way. He is not backing off of his conservative credentials one bit. But I do think that the president sees that the abortion issue has had negative consequences in the last 2 cycles, and he's a little bit concerned about that. Would he move away from that or come up with something? And I do think on that the Republicans have to come up with a way that they can say, hey, we're pro-life, and explain what that means. Yeah. It's not just does the right to choose take advantage over the life of an unborn child.
Right.
I mean, there's no comparison there for inconvenience versus are we going to terminate it otherwise perfectly good pregnancy?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a tough deal. So will he back off of that? Will he look at a wealth tax? You know, he's already said that he won't look at entitlement reform. Trump, I mean.
Yeah.
And so
says we won't touch it.
So at the end of the day, those are things that, you know, we're going to have to take a hard look at, and you really shouldn't take anything off the table until you figure out the process going forward. And also, look, while we're dealing with all this, Communist China is at war with us every day. We're more concerned about hurting somebody's feelings. So at this point in time, I think Pence has certainly some validity on what he's saying there, and we'll see how it shakes out. I just think, you know, and again, Mike Pence is somebody that I certainly respected and admired more than anybody else I ever met up there. And who could have done a better job as vice president? He gave Trump credibility in 2016 that he didn't have without Pence. And so, and you couldn't have a more loyal person, and it was perfect except for January 6th of 2021 when what he did took a lot of courage to say he was going to follow the Constitution. He didn't have that authority. So those issues, I believe what you're going to see is as this goes along, Trump is going to still be obviously in the lead. I think DeSantis is going to continue to drop down. And I think over the next 2 months, you're going to see Pence move into second place on the polling. And, you know, I'm sure you're doing the same thing I'm doing is you have informal conversations and you're informal polling. Everybody thinks Trump's going to be the nominee, but none of the ones I'm talking to are voting for Trump. It's like,
interesting.
Okay, what's going on here?
I've run into that. I've heard a lot of people say, gosh, I wish he'd drop out. I've heard that from probably more people than I've heard, man, I'm so glad he's in and I hope he wins and I'm all for him. But there's no doubt he's got a very strong base. I've sort of analyzed it as about half Republicans are very strongly in his court, and about a quarter fit into the camp of, well, I like his policies, but I'm not crazy about his personality. And then the other quarter, just I'm never voting for that guy again. I mean, that's kind of the way I've divided
that's
up.
That's not a bad division.
Republican, the makeup, the composition. We'll see where that goes. But I thought that Mr. Pence did an excellent job in this op-ed of showing the contrast between his views on key issues and Mr. Trump's, and really exposing that Donald Trump may not be the conservative bona fide that I think the average voter thinks he is.
You know, I'll just say this. We'll forevermore be grateful to President Trump for
what
he did and what he accomplished. I mean, moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, that alone was such a significant thing. What he did on the Supreme Court, getting 3 justices appointed, a strong approach. So everybody, like you said, loved his policies.
Yep.
But my dream ticket is Mike Pence and Tim Scott. So I just want you to know that's I'll go ahead and put that down right now. It's my dream ticket. Okay.
Well, and let's also give Trump credit for his economic policies, his regulatory framework. Repeal 2 for every new one that you add, and energy. He got out of the way of the energy sector.
If COVID doesn't happen, he's overwhelmingly reelected.
I think
to
that's
a second
totally right.
term. I don't think there's any doubt that would have happened. And even with COVID, had the voting rules not been relaxed and eased so greatly for mail-in ballots and everything else, he's still
possibly
might have been able to have gotten elected. So it just the COVID reaction really skewed everything and made it really a tough road for him.
And as you well know, just final comment before you go, that the presidential elections with the electoral vote process really come down to a handful of counties in about 4 states.
It's no doubt it's a narrow group that actually will determine this.
Congressman, always good to see you, sir. Thanks for coming in today.
My privilege.
Appreciate
Thanks so much.
Yes, sir.
See you next time.